thank you very much for inviting me to this amazing conference full of passionate people about waste management, zero waste, circular economy. And congratulations to Nipa Fagio and GAIA Africa for a really nice conference. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you. So, thank you. Yes, applause to the organizers. Okay, as I was preparing this presentation, I was talking to one person that you might know, Enzo Favoino. He actually framed this approach so well that I decided to quote him. So as we move, zero waste is a journey. As we move in this journey, we have to take responsibility for the residual waste in a way that reduces its harmful impacts on climate and communities, but it also continues the way towards zero waste, so that there are no obstacles to go towards zero waste. And one of the obstacles is incineration. But in the same time, what we have to take into account is not that we will propose one single technology, because there is a mix of technologies according to the context, but rather a systemic approach. But there is one technology that I would like to talk to you about that is totally a no-go. It's so stupid in my own country, and we also see in many regions in the world. It was actually mentioned today, but I decided to put it all different arguments on one slide. So incineration and any other thermal treatment, okay? We also speak about cement kilns and also pyrolysis and other thermal treatment. It's not a good solution. It is a continued linear approach. It is against circular economy. It is against zero waste. It cannot be a transitional approach. If something is transitional, it at least goes in the same direction, but slower. This one goes in the opposite direction. When we look at waste composition, what Merci said, most of waste is organic waste, is wet. There is, and even if you, if you take all the recyclables out and even organic waste out, and you have only really residual waste, the calorific value of this residual waste is so low that you will not get the needed temperature to burn it. You need high temperature to burn it in order to destroy all the contaminants, or not even all, because there will be still some that will be there. So the lock-in effect, we've seen that in countries in Europe where there is a lot of incinerators, they are struggling to reduce their waste. And also there are, for municipalities, as you represent here, there is a big threat of this concept, put or pay. You have to, every year, every day, every month, you have to bring an amount of waste for next 20, 30 years, because that's the contract usually that is done with the incinerator. If you don't bring enough waste, you will pay. And that's a clear, slow down, pole. Okay. Energy, yes, waste to energy, people say, but actually it's waste of energy. There are so many examples. Basically, you just recover some energy, but it's not energy as compared to what you put in the products in first place. Actually, one example in Africa of waste incinerator is the one in Repi. It is always on and off. It is a failure. Even the local electricity authority decided, I mean, they are fed up with it. They don't want to do anything else they don't want to do anything with it. They don't want to have anything in common with this failure incineration. So waste to energy, when we talk about incineration, is really a false mistake, a false solution. It's a mistake. Pollution, it was mentioned here, but speaking about pollution, we also always have to think about the bottom ashes and fly ashes, which are highly pollutant, and they are leftovers of burning. That's why we need to landfill them somewhere. But where are those landfills in Africa and other developing countries? Yeah, hazardous landfills. You have to treat them, and it's very expensive. And it's a centralized approach, and it's not something that serves communities. We need a decentralized approach. And jobs. This is just one slide showing how much jobs you lose, actually. You don't only burn waste and resources, you also burn jobs and opportunities, as compared to other solutions that bring much more jobs. This number can differ between regions, but yeah, I would say that in developing countries, because of abundance of labor and many things can be done manually, the jobs potential of reuse and recycling is much higher. So, yes, here I brought this nice formula which shows a system approach. This is brought by Jack, who is also here today. Mathematicians will laugh, like, what is this? What is a formula? But by implementing door-to-door collection, pay as you throw, deposit return system, and then mixed waste sorting at the end, you'll really aim to go towards 90% separate collection. So we have 10% non-separately collected. This is the residual waste I will talk to you about. that we will have to deal with. But mixed waste sorting. Because in the mixed waste, as shown here by a RAP report in UK, there is still a lot of recyclables. Potentially recyclable, already recyclable, or potentially substitutable. So yeah, that's the upstream solution that has to come. From governance level, this is also interesting. There are cities and regions and countries in Europe that set up a cap, a target of maximum allowed generation of residual waste. Even at European level, by 2030, we aim to halve the residual waste generation by 50%, right? In Italy, which was mentioned today many times, many municipalities go below 30 kilograms per person per year of residual waste. That's still more than Fräulein, but I would say 30 kilograms per person is already a good example. It's really, at the society level, we are going good direction. So this is a measure because we have caps on GHG emissions. We have targets on GHG emissions. Why not to have governance, obligations on also residual waste generation, so like reduction. So, but then we have this 10% of mixed waste. So leftover mixed waste. It still happens, and we still should deal with that. And that's one approach that we would suggest. It's kind of MRF, MRBT, but with improved optical sorting systems. Out of 1 ton of waste, you could still potentially take out up to 1/4 of that, so 200 kilograms, 250 of recyclables, usually paper and cardboard, also fibers, metals. And the rest is organic. There's still a lot of organic waste in leftover mixed waste. And that has to be, something has to be done with it. You could compost, but I would not call it a compost because it's already so contaminated. So you biostabilize it in order to reduce the methane potential. So it's biostabilization that you still put on a landfill as a cover. You know, daily cover or closing cover. You need quite a lot of organic material still to put there. It's a sanitized landfill, okay? It's not a dump site. And that's something I would also call. There is a place of sanitized landfills in a zero waste strategy as a transition by the time we get there to zero waste. But these are sanitized landfills that have a lower methane potential. Also because this system is just much more flexible, scalable, it's cheaper, fast to implement, it reduces GHG emissions, I will show in a moment. Why? By degrading biogenic carbon. So this is the biostabilization element, so that bio-waste reduces methane emissions. And fossil carbon, so like plastic fibers, are locked, So you can still downcycle them, which is better than incineration still, right? Or you can just landfill them in a stabilized sanitary landfill. And just one slide last is to show, if you focus on the green part here. So green part, so this is avoided emissions. As compared to landfill or incinerated. This is avoided emissions thanks to the mixed waste sorting, of course, all the other R's before, and still having a landfill, a sanitary landfill, where if bio-waste is biosanitized, biostabilized, it is still a reduction as compared to the baseline. So this is really a recap of what colleagues said also before. Prevention and reuse is a start. It is the most important. Circular economic design upstream. Separate collection, mandatory. That includes also the deposit return system, door-to-door collection, which proves very efficient in Europe, but also I guess I would like to learn if also happens in other countries in the world. And then recycling, including composting, including black soldier flies. And then the last part, let's not forget it. Let's deal with mixed waste, leftovers, by stabilizing the organic fraction, and by making sure that this fraction, together with the some non-recyclable items that are still out there, goes to a sanitary landfill. Yeah. So thank you so much. I really ran through this presentation. Thank you so much for your understanding. But I'm around for another 3 days, so happy to interact. Thank you.
Waste management methods, and the regional distribution of its destinations. So here it is. Again, this was collected from the UNEP report, but the destinations, it says 62% are the controlled one. And what are these? This is recycling, this is landfilling, this is waste to energy. 38% is what they call the uncontrolled. These are the not collected, or if it is collected, it is being dumped or burned openly. Okay? The treatment that was mentioned is 60% landfill, 19% recycled, and 13% waste to energy. So if you can see the distribution here from the region, we can see that the recycling rate, this is the blue one. So for example, in East and South Asia, the recycling is very low. Yeah? But in Western Europe, it says there the recycling is very high. So this is the light blue color. Another thing is the Sub-Saharan Africa. We see this as a very low blue, which is the recycling, and very high on uncontrolled. And orange ones are the use of the waste to energy. Okay. Next slide, please. But all this data, we have a staggering information or data that some 2.7 billion people do not have their waste collected. Can you imagine that? So to break this down, it is about 2 billion people their waste is not being collected, and these are from the rural areas. And another 700,000 in the urban areas. This amount does not include, this amount is about 540 million tons of municipal solid waste, or 27% of the global total collected, not collected waste. Okay, so next slide please. Now, there is a percentage for use of recycling, there is a percentage for waste to energy. What we can see here is that in the reuse and recycling, this data, this does not account to the materials that have been reused. So take note, this data here, it does not account to the materials that are reused, and does not also account for materials that has been exported to other countries and has been rejected and therefore dumped or disposed somewhere else. So that's the data. When we go to the waste to energy, before that, the report says that only 90% of municipal solid waste is currently recycled. Recycling is not the ultimate goal of waste management. It is always better to reduce waste by preventing it in the first place. And the first panel said that it should be that way. Now let's go to waste to energy. Here we have the blue color is for the, hold on. The blue color is for treated by waste to energy in millions of tons, and the dark color is the percentage of the municipal solid waste. So in this graph, we will see that in the East and Southeast Asia, it's the highest in terms of the usage of waste to energy or being treated by waste to energy. But somehow we will think, and I again encourage you to read the report, that when it comes to Sub-Saharan Africa and Central and South Asia, there is zero. So the data is not that efficient as I see it and as I read it. So, but in this scenario, the report is saying that thermal treatment technologies reduce incentives to decrease waste generation and move towards a zero waste and low carbon society. Okay, next slide please. Before we enter into the realm of zero waste, which you've heard earlier, the United Nations report said that where the waste to energy facilities are already in use, emissions from their waste to energy are coming under increasing scrutiny vis-a-vis the need to reduce anthropogenic atmospheric carbon. Therefore, we need, a lot of people are now asking the question, is it really waste to energy as the solution for treatment of waste? Um, in improving waste management worldwide will require a significant investment. By far the most affordable solution is to drastically reduce waste and value secondary materials as a resource. And thus, that's the importance of zero waste. So zero waste is veering away from the old conservative waste management, and it is basically going to as a resource management. So, in the zero waste model, waste prevention is the key. Redesign, reduce, using this chart here, and breaking free from plastics. So to end my presentation, my very short presentation, I would like to quote the United Nations Environmental Program Executive Director. Her name is Inger Anderson. And she said recently in the International Forum on Green World Solidarity, it's a very long title, she said that zero waste is a win-win. Keeping materials in the economy and strengthening waste management will deliver financial savings, protects people's health, safeguard nature, and reduce emission. Only a drastic reduction in waste generation will secure a livable and affordable future for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Merci, for that wonderful presentation. Merci is from Plastic Negros Oriental in the Philippines. She is a Break Free from Plastic member. Next up, we're going to be discussing how we can reduce waste by more than half. And so, how in doing that you need to tackle organic waste. To help us do this is Shibu from GAIA, and please a round of applause for Shibu.
Mambo. So, I'm very happy to be here. This is my second time in Tanzania. Because last year I was here just exploring the organic waste management systems run by Nuclear Value. So I'm very grateful to the team Nuclear Value for facilitating this and inviting me here, and the whole GAIA Africa team. I'm just looking at, thank you, Merci, for setting the ground very clear on the scenario of waste. And it's more than waste management right now. It's not just a kind of issue of litter seeing around the corner. It's not just about waste. It is all about resource use and management. It is all about environment and health. Next slide, please. So I just want to, I know that people here you already know, but I just want to remind all of you again and again and again that right now this is a climate issue. So this is one area where we can have some fast action on GHG reductions. So there are studies, there are papers. This is by CCAC on global methane assessment. So they have come up with data, enough data for our policymakers, for our administrators to understand that, okay, this is a key area where we can intervene and we can actually make a difference. Next, please. GAIA have come up with a very specific study on organics in municipal solid waste, looking at the data available with the cities. And I think I encourage all of you to just go and download these reports from GAIA site, and you can read it. So there is there is a kind of the possibility is that the potential is that 95% of methane emission from waste can be reduced by 2030. 2030 is the deadline. In terms of all the climate negotiations, you always keep on hearing about 2030. That is a time where we have to come up with our plans ready, and we have to control the GHG emission. And this is one easy area where we can do that. So organics management is also for, it's a kind of a climate action. Zero waste is a climate action, and this is, I just want to reiterate again. Next, please. I just want to I think already this kind of a chart has been presented here. throughout the global south, whether it is in Asia Pacific or in Africa region or in Latin America. We see a kind of a common trend. Like if you look at the municipal solid waste, majority of municipal solid waste belongs to organics, and it varies from 40% to 70%. In some places it is up to 80%, and with moisture content up to 70%. So that means, next please. And if you look again into that, into your waste sources, so this is also important for the city managers or the administrators, not to just to look at the waste quantity. Normally in our conventional waste management system, we just look at the numbers, okay, 2,000 tons of waste. They don't think about where it comes from, what it is. And for 2,000 tons, that is why we end up in waste to energy or landfills. So you just look at very closely, almost 50% of this waste is being generated from households and some from clusters like commercial establishments or markets. So that actually gives out a kind of a way, okay, this is the way, like if you do segregation at source, you can actually manage more than 70% of your problem. If you look at the waste stream, almost 70% is organic and 50% of it is happening from households, and you do segregation at source, you just take out the organics, then you have only 30 to 40 or 30 to 50% of waste to be managed. That is mostly dry waste we call it as a non-biodegradable waste, which is plastics, paper, metal, whatever it is. So this is one area where we can work. And if you look at the global, like if you just Asia Pacific, like from ADB thing, the average is 70% in Asian regions. In Africa, it is by AUDA, NEPAD study, it is 57%. I think it varies from cities to city. And the one important thing is that 70 to 80% of this organic waste is water. It is just water. And all our city waste collection transportation system burning their diesel to transport this water. And more or less it is more than like minimum 20 kilometers they transport from a city to an outside the city. So you see, you are transporting the huge quantity of waste. It's mostly organic and it is mostly water by burning precious diesel and transporting it out 20 to 30 kilometers. In some places it is even 40 kilometers outside the city, and then doing centralized composting. They call it a centralized composting, but it ends up as a kind of a landfill, especially in global south. So the thing is that we have to ask people to segregate. That is wrong. If you ask people to segregate, people think that this is an additional job, right? Segregate, I have to segregate. You just tell them that don't mix it. So that's the other way of doing it. So that actually worked for us. That actually worked for us in our communities. We said, why are you adding to the problem? You just don't mix it. We just keep it separate. Like you segregate it and say, oh, this is another job. I don't have time. I don't have time to segregate. No, you don't segregate, but you don't mix it up. Yeah, next. So, and if you look at organics, there is a simple way, like the chart, the study charts clearly shows that it is happening decentralized way. So why don't you manage it in a decentralized way? When you say decentralized way at source, again people have a question, oh, every single person has to do composting at house? No, not necessarily. There are people, for example, if you go to the slum area, that's a reality even now in our global south. Slum areas, there is no space. And even in cities, there are people living in very limited space. They cannot do composting, or they cannot do anaerobic digestion in their house. So we have to come up with a kind of a decentralized overflow management system for organics. That's a very simple thing. Decentralized, it's overflow management. So you just encourage people who can afford to have a compost at home or afford to have an anaerobic digester at home, just have it. And people who cannot manage it at home, you just bring it to the nearest cluster. So at source level, it is at the household level, it is the institution level, and it must be there at the market level as well. In the markets, it has to be there. And at the household level, there are many equipments. They are not complicated. They are very cheap, like even 2 PVC pipes, or some composters, or biogas digesters, or even earthen pots. So many options are available. And if people who cannot do that at household level, it can be brought to the cluster level. So that is overflowing from the cluster level. Even at the household level who is doing composting, at some point of time you may have excess waste. For example, there is a function happening in the house and you have some excess waste. You cannot manage it with your smaller devices. Then you need a space to bring that excess waste to the one place. That is called cluster level. So you need community level composters or community level biogas plants or market or public space in public spaces. So these are the simple small things like this. The pink cabins. This is something which we use in our area. This is an aerobic composter. Or then you need common facilities for the rest. That is very specific. For example, the poultry, the meat waste collected from the city. You cannot just have them on the city to like in the middle of the city to do composting. There are some issues. But there are rendering plants which converts that into many byproducts, including animal feed. So that's a kind of a centralized system, but that centralized system is only for meat waste, very specifically for meat waste. Or it can be converted, like for example, the food waste from the restaurants or other eateries can be collected and sent into the animal as an animal feed. This is happening, and there is a system established. So the only thing is that you have to like streamline that system, legitimize it, and bring standards. So that actually makes it easier. So there is no additional infrastructure, there is no additional capital investment. Or you can just connect it to the farms. It is also happening, especially just outside the city. And the city level mechanism, it can be a kind of common facility, which is not that big, but again, it is the place for absorbing the rest of the material, which is not handled in all these things. So you have three levels: the household level, and then you have a cluster level, then you have a common facility. The common facility are different things, and parallelly you also have material recovery facilities. I think the first panel it was there, like it was very evident how material recovery facilities are working. So this is a simple thing. The composting technology is very simple, or anaerobic technology is very simple. And we think that people do not know. No, people know how to ferment things at household level. People know how to preserve things. So composting is in between these two, right? So that is a. So you just allow them to understand. If you go and teach them composting, they are not going to learn. It's impossible. There's a wall. But you say that you know how to ferment your food, right? And how to preserve your food. So composting is in between. You just to do some adjustments, you can do this. So that kind of a the confidence you have to build in community. So that needs not machinery, not plans, but that needs people. You need more people, and you need committed people. Next. And why should they compost? People will not compost for waste management. They will compost for safe food. So you just connect it to the safe food program where urban kitchen gardening can happen. So that is a motivation for communities. It is happening in many places. Next, please. And ensure environmental justice and just transition in the people who are involved in that process, waste pickers, waste workers, and then build capacity within them so that we can take it forward. Next, please. You think that all these things were theories? No, they are theories, but those theories are evolved from the practice of cities or the communities who practiced it first. So there are many cases. I think you are like, I'm very happy that the people who led those projects are here, the administrators are here from the city of San Fernando. There are people like, there are many cases from Philippines, many cities are doing, so many cities are there, or even Japan, next please. Or from Malaysia, or from Indonesia. You are not convinced yet? Yes, bigger cities like Pune, Mumbai, Bengaluru. And if you are, again, you have some doubt about the population it is covered in Kerala, just the other side of this ocean, that is in India, is Kerala where I come from. It is being implemented in almost 1,000 local self-government covering 30 million population. So that means it is not theoretical. It is happening. Zero waste is happening and it can be done. And this needs people power, and we need to empower our people. We need to trust our people. Next, please. There are many materials, so let us start. There are many materials available with GAIA network, within GAIA network. So you just speak to NIPEFACIO, speak to GAIA Africa, or there are people who are working, like the Waste Pickers Association, waste leaders are here. And specifically, my friends are here, Shishiki, Marco, and John, those people who know how to do composting, how to set up these systems for a community. They are managing it. So there are materials available. You can just download, and there is a material in the GAIA website on Zero Waste City Manual, how to create this system, how to implement this. So all these things are available. And if you have any questions, or if you need any support, please contact the people here. Thank you.
recyclables, essentially reusables, how to identify materials. We're going to discuss recycling methods and highlighting especially the role of waste makers in the justice system. So over to you, sir.
Thank you. How are you? So I am going to be speaking on zooming into the role of waste makers in the reusables and recyclables. So I'm from Ethiopia, from an organization called EcoJustice Ethiopia, and we're working mainly on promoting environmental rights and climate justice. And Ethiopia happens to be also the city, or Ethiopia has a capital city that has the first and third waste-to-energy incineration plant, which are also mentioned as a possible remark later on. So, talking about the power of reusables, I just want to first highlight the importance of reducing waste. And this has been a point that has already been made, but I just want to reiterate that this will involve changing the behavior of everybody in our consumption patterns. And this is not an easy job. Because when we are talking about zero waste, we have to also remember that we start from making sure that we don't buy and consume things that we don't necessarily need. And this culture of overconsumption is basically killing the planet and making the world almost inhabitable to our own selves. So we have to make sure that whenever we start a conversation by trying to change the behavior of our consumption patterns, and that the most eco-friendly item we can have is not a new water bottle that we're going to buy, but it's already what we have in our households. And that's also a point that needs to be made on a daily basis for everyone. Because now industry is catching on this trend of sustainability, offering us new products that we need to buy to be eco-friendly. So that is also something that needs to be checked. So when we come to recyclables or understanding recyclables, we have to also understand our local context. So my presentation is going to focus on plastic waste specifically, and I have to mention that not all plastics are created equally. Depending on the chemical composition of the plastics, the ability of our local communities, recycling facilities may be limited. Therefore, as much as possible, it's also always important to be mindful of how the end of life of the product we are using is going to be managed locally. Because nowadays the technology to recycle most things exists somewhere in the world, but that technology may not exist in our city and in our country. So in that specific cases, if there is an option, we should always try to avoid materials that cannot be recycled locally. So we have to consider local recycling facilities. And when we talk about recycling, we have to consider both chemical and mechanical recycling. And with mechanical recycling, as the name infers, it involves physically breaking down the materials to find a way to reutilize them. Whereas chemical recycling involves using chemicals to break down the especially plastics to their basic components so that they can be reutilized to build something else. But chemical recycling especially has a lot of limitations and has emissions in the way, also in the way we recycle. Risks associated with chemical recycling involves hazardous conditions for people who also work in the recycling sector. Chemical recycling also emits a lot of pollutants to the environment and exposes the people living around recycling facilities to a lot of emissions, and also adds to greenhouse gas emissions and exacerbates our carbon footprints. And we have to consider that the plastic crisis is exacerbated again by the first point I mentioned in my presentation, which is our consumption pattern. And one of the major source of plastic pollution are the obvious single-use plastics that we are using for a lot of things. And as it is known, 90% of the greenhouse gas emissions associated with plastics come from the extraction of raw materials. Plastics are made from fossil fuels. So So that is going to again exacerbate the emissions and expose us further to climate change. Plastic pollution is also exacerbating the triple planetary crisis, not just climate change, but also causing more biodiversity loss and also causing pollution to a large extent. Therefore, it's always important to push for policies and laws that will forbid the use of single-use plastics. We have exemplary initiatives in Africa, like in countries like Rwanda, Kenya, Tanzania, which have banned single-use plastic bags, for instance. We need to move these bans also to single-use plastic cups and other single-use plastic products, so that we can have actually a more realistic path to zero waste. In my own country, Ethiopia, we are also pushing hard for ban of single-use plastic products, and we have a legislation now being considered by the Council of Ministers. Hopefully, we'll join the list of countries that have banned single-use plastic products very soon in the continent. It's also extremely important to appreciate the very essential role of waste pickers in recycling and reusing, especially informal waste pickers and also formal waste pickers have played the role of being the backbone of the recycling industry, especially in our continent. Because without waste pickers, these thriving recycling industries will have basically no sustainable means of getting their supplies to their factories. So that means the recycling industry in Africa would literally collapse without waste pickers. Because the municipal installed waste collection systems in most of our cities has still a lot of room for development. Therefore, it's being supplemented by formal and informal waste pickers that actually go around the neighborhoods all over major cities in Africa, pick the recyclable materials from waste, and they make sure that it's not thrown into the landfill. That means they also play a huge contribution to reducing the methane that will be produced from the landfills, because they are reducing the mass that goes into the landfills. And they are doing this under huge, unjust conditions. EcoJustice Ethiopia recently produced a documentary that showcased the life of informal waste pickers in Addis Ababa. When you have the time, I encourage you to go on YouTube and see. It's called Beyond the Trash. And in that documentary, in our research, what we have learned is that the price waste pickers get for the recyclable products they collect has continuously been increasing for the last number of years. So if I give you the simple example of single-use water bottles in Ethiopia, when water bottles were first introduced in Ethiopia, the price in our local currency was around 3 or 4 birr for the water bottle. And at that time, the empty water bottle was sold for 1 birr. So that's like 30% of the whole value was given to the plastic container, because that's also the reality, because what's inside is water which is relatively abundantly available for everybody, but the companies actually say it's a plastic bottle. And that was the trend in the beginning. But right now in Addis Ababa, formal and informal waste pickers have to collect a kilo of plastic bottles. You can imagine how many plastic bottles they need to collect. And they are selling it to prices as low as 10. Other initiatives should always support waste pickers and make sure that there is justice for the work they are supplying. Small changes, big impacts. Thank you.